This is the lecture for Kant's Racism by Lucy Allais. So the only thing to point out before you read this is that near the end of the article, uh, Kant or Allais talks about the sort of structure of Kant's political philosophy, and uh, so this is footnote 54 in the middle of this sentence, starting far from only giving us a picture of an ideal world. Kant's framework for thinking about what rightful relations require enables us to give a theoretical account of ways in which states can fail to meet this to various degrees, and so on and so forth. And then she has a pretty long footnote here about ideal theory, and also she talks a bit about Mills, and we didn't like Mills has some objections to ideal theory. They didn't come up in the Mills article we read for Wednesday, but I mean, they come up a tiny, tiny bit. But they're like, so this talk about ideal theory, this is a big topic in philosophy. It relates to us because it's sort of come up already. If you think back to the conversation around Ripstein, and that conversation, and I think that lecture even brought up that this had come up earlier in this class, this question about sort of to what extent Kant's political philosophy has like an idealized view of things in mind, versus to what extent he's trying to give us rules for non-ideal situations. And we saw Ripstein sort of very clearly saying Kant has like a very non-ideal picture of how things are going. Um, I had brought up earlier the possibility that maybe to some extent Kant has kind of idealized notions in mind when I talked about the whether you even like when we're talking about intervention and whether you can intervene in a state, and people were talking about like a genocidal state, and there was this suggestion, I think from me, it might have been somebody else, do these even count as states? Or maybe if you have like Nazi Germany or something, it's not even a state in Kant's picture. It's sort of too bad to count. You're basically in a state of nature there, and so you could have intervention in those cases because it's not even intervening in a state. And so that's this sort of question about like to what extent is Kant idealizing when he talks about states, for instance? Does that include terrible states, very bad states like Nazi Germany, or is he idealizing to some extent? And when he says states, he's only talking about like good states or something. And so Allais, she doesn't talk about that very specific point, but she is talking broadly about this point, to what extent Kant is idealizing in his political philosophy. And this is actually going to come up again next week, because this will be one point that I think on Friday somebody's going to use to discuss Kant's theory of revolution. So this is coming up again.